My name is Lauren Mitchell, 38 years old, communications director at a major firm in San Diego, and I wasn't fired like my husband thought. I was promoted. A turning point I once dreamed of, but that night when I looked into the cold, angry eyes of Nathan, the man who once swore to love me for life, I knew if I told the truth, I would miss something. Very dark. I pretended to collapse, he believed me, and in that moment I discovered the entire orchestrated plan between my husband and mother-in-law to destroy my life, step by step. Have you ever been trapped by the very person you trusted most and they smiled as you walked into it? If you've ever felt dismissed, replaced, or quietly cornered, leave a comment. Hit like, subscribe to the channel, and follow along as I continue uncovering the truth and rising back up in a way no one saw coming, because the real story has only just begun. I still remember clearly the first time I met Nathan. He wasn't remarkable, a structural engineer with messy hair and a dusty pickup truck, but there was something in his eyes that made me feel safe. At the time, I was a temporary communications assistant at a small company, earning barely enough to cover rent without working overtime, and he always said, "You're going to get the position you deserve." I don't doubt it for a second. I fell in love with Nathan because of that unconditional belief. The early years together weren't always easy, but we endured it together, eating instant noodles when paychecks were late, staying up late to tape my presentation drafts on the living room wall. He once drove over 3 hours just to bring me the USB I'd forgotten on a work trip, and on the day I got my first promotion to manager, Nathan was there, holding me tight in the elevator on the 17th floor as if I had just reached Everest. We got married after 4 years of dating, no big wedding, just a small ceremony on the beach, a few close friends, and the golden sunset pouring over the simple rental wedding dress I wore for the day. At the time, I thought I chose the right person, but then Nathan's father suddenly passed away from a stroke. That happened 3 years after we got married, and I swear, from the moment we read the will, Nathan was no longer the man I used to know. His father left him the old house in Santa Barbara, a 2-story wooden home with a red tile roof and a balcony overlooking the Lavender Hills. We had been there a few times when his parents were alive, usually on weekends, grilling in the backyard and arguing over which sauce tasted better. But after he became the owner, Nathan started speaking about the house differently. "This place is my father's legacy. I don't want to change anything. We should keep the old wooden floors. You know my mom's taste." First, I didn't mind. Everyone gets sentimental about childhood memories. But then Vivian Carter, my mother-in-law, started showing up more often. I didn't hate her. She just always made me feel not enough. Vivian was the type of woman the whole town respected. Head of the church women's group, coordinator of community fundraisers, writer for the monthly church magazine, she dressed neatly, spoke gently, but her gaze always felt like it was measuring someone's morality. And I knew I wasn't part of the standards she had in mind. From the first time we moved to Santa Barbara, I noticed strange signs, at first just passing comments. "Lauren, baking at home is also a way to show love to your husband." Nathan's mom never stayed out past 5 p.m. "Men need to feel like they're leading. Don't make him feel small." I tried to smile, tried to be patient, but every time Nathan heard those comments, he stayed silent. No defense, no disagreement. I started feeling like an outsider in the very house we once dreamed of together. Then Nathan suggested combining our finances. "We're a team, right? Whatever you earn is for this home too." I agreed, even though I felt a little hesitant. I thought it was normal between husband and wife. We opened a joint account, split all expenses evenly, but soon after, he started mentioning a loan to buy the backyard from the neighbor, a deal under his name. For convenience. I put most of my year-end bonus into it, but the contract didn't have my name. Then came the friends. He didn't forbid me, but every time I went out to dinner with my old group, he'd throw out a line like, "Those single friends of yours don't seem all that happy, do they?" Or, "You need rest. Why are you always running around?" I began shrinking myself, cutting back on meetups, quitting weekend yoga classes, staying home more, cooking more. We hardly had any deep conversations anymore.
He only asked about bills, the stove, the washing machine. And I, the one he once called passionate and full of light, was now just someone who made sure everything ran so he wouldn't be bothered. I used to believe it was just a phase, that the pressure of losing his father, moving homes, and his mom living nearby had made Nathan tense, that everything would return. I didn't realize it wasn't a phase. It was a new version of him, a version I had never met but was slowly becoming the one making decisions for my life without ever asking me. And I let it happen, because I thought, if I loved enough, waited long enough, everything would be okay. But I was wrong, and that mistake almost cost me everything. I can't remember exactly when Nathan's phone started always facing down on the table. Maybe it was last fall when he switched to a new iPhone model and suddenly changed his passcode. It wasn't because I checked his phone I never had, because I used to trust him. But when you live with someone long enough, you notice the small changes, the unfamiliar ringtone in the middle of the night, nameless messages flashing and disappearing, or the way they slightly flinch when you walk into the room while they're staring at their screen. At first, I reassured myself. He's stressed maybe it's a client or his mom. But then I discovered a strange money transfer from the joint account. Not just once, but several times with the note, Charity Community Group. But there was no organization name, no thank you note, no receipt. I gently asked once simply, Nathan, did you send money from the joint account somewhere? I saw a few strange entries. He didn't look up, only replied flatly, Oh, Mom asked me to send it to the prayer group, just some tea and snacks money. Tea and snacks? Once I could believe, but then it was nearly $2,000 in 3 months. And then there was the topic of children. We had a very clear agreement. No kids. At least not while both of us were focused on our careers. But lately, Nathan kept repeating lines like, Don't you think it's time we thought about family? If it's always about work, when will it ever feel stable? Vivian said the older you get, the harder it'll be to have children. I sat silently in the kitchen, listening to my husband repeat his mother's words like they were gospel truth, as if we had never had that 3-hour conversation in the living room 2 years ago, when we clearly agreed we wouldn't have children unless we were truly ready. I started to feel like I was being changed without being asked. The house I once loved, with its large windows facing the hills and the kitchen where I had picked every cabinet handle, was no longer a place I wanted to come home to. Vivian had her own key. She came whenever she pleased, opened the fridge like it was hers, pointed at the plumber like she owned the place, and gave instructions to the gardener as if I were a tenant. One Friday morning, I came home early because a meeting had been canceled. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed the front door was slightly ajar. Nathan's voice echoed from the office inside. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but that sentence, short, clear, and ice cold, froze me in place. She's almost convinced. One more nudge and she'll fall right into place. A beat of silence, then a low, mocking laugh. I stepped back, gently shut the car door, and pretended I had never come back. But the entire afternoon my head was spinning. Was I she? Convinced of what? And what was the push? That night, Nathan smiled at me across the dinner table. He asked, Why do you look so serious? I gave a soft smile. I was just thinking, maybe I should take a break from work. His eyes lit up. A flicker of relief passed through what looked like a casual glance. I knew I had guessed right. In that moment, I began collecting the truth. I dug through old emails, contribution receipts for the house I had sent him, and copies of interior design contracts with my signature on them. I bought an external hard drive and began backing up every document related to our finances, the house, and investments. I recorded conversations whenever Vivian came to the house. I texted Monica Green, my college best friend, now a personal and marital assets attorney in San Diego. Monica, I need to see you. It's urgent. Is it what I think it is? She replied with just 3 words. Don't sign anything. I didn't sign. I didn't speak either. I clung to every piece of evidence like a soldier quietly preparing for a war the enemy still thought they were winning. I still smiled when Nathan hugged me, still nodded when Vivian asked if I'd reconsidered having children. But each night after the house fell asleep, I sat in the office reviewing every file, every recording, every bank statement. I didn't cry anymore because I knew this pain was turning into a weapon, and when the time came, I would use it so no one would ever again dare call me a burden to be replaced. It was a Wednesday afternoon. My important meeting was canceled at the last minute due to a technical issue with the client. I didn't tell anyone, just turned the car toward home out of habit, feeling a quiet sense of joy. The thought of a peaceful afternoon, brewing a cup of chamomile tea, Reopening the draft of my unfinished speech, it all made me feel lighter after weeks of tension. But as I stepped onto the porch, my hand touching the wooden door handle, I heard soft laughter coming from inside. Nathan's voice and another woman's, older, sharp, familiar. Vivian. The door was unlocked, and from inside came footsteps followed by a clear voice. You can't let her linger around this house any longer. She doesn't belong here, Nathan. I gently pushed the door open a crack and crept along the hallway by the stairs. The thick carpet silenced my steps. Nathan replied, his tone flat. I know, but if I push too fast, she'll suspect something. Right now, she still thinks she has a choice. Vivian chuckled, her voice tinged with triumph. Don't overestimate Lauren. Women like her, half smart, educated, yes, successful, sure, but they have no idea where real power lies. I gripped the banister. My lips pressed so tightly they turned white. Elisa is ready, she continued. She's the perfect choice. Quiet, humble, obedient. Not like the kind who's always in meetings, giving speeches, appearing on TV like Lauren. I heard Nathan sigh. I know, Elisa told me last week. The little boy started calling me Daddy. My whole body went cold. Elisa. I had met her a few times, always brief encounters at church or during events hosted by Vivian, a gentle woman with a soft voice, always in long floral dresses, always bowing her head politely when greeting me all. I had never seen her as a threat, and I had no idea that the divorced single mother was being prepared to replace me in the very home I once called my own. Vivian lowered her voice, but not enough for me to miss it. She's over 35 now, people are starting to whisper. No children, no real contribution to the church. I told the women's group if Lauren truly loved you, she'd step aside on her own. We just need to add a little more pressure. I don't know if accusing her is the right move. Nathan hesitated. You don't have to do anything. Let me handle it. I already told Pastor Hall there are signs Lauren may have committed financial fraud at her company. Just suspicions, but in this town, suspicion is enough to cast someone out. I bit my lip until I tasted blood, but Vivian didn't stop. Her tone sharpened like she was chairing a secret council meeting. And if that doesn't work, we still have one final card. Infertility. I clenched my hands so hard the knuckles turned pale. We had an abortion before, didn't she? Before the wedding? Mom! I'm not sure, I never asked. You don't need to be sure. People don't need proof. Just enough believers. If necessary, I'll say she told me during a private prayer session. Don't you think people will believe me? At that moment, I no longer felt like I was hiding behind the staircase. I felt like I was standing in the middle of a courtroom, being sentenced by people cloaked in morality yet stripped of all conscience. I forced myself to breathe, to stay silent even though my throat tightened. Every word they said drove another sharp thorn into the trust I once placed in my husband. I heard the clink of a glass set down. Nathan spoke slowly, as if weighing options. So what do we do about the house if Lauren refuses to leave? Vivian answered without hesitation. Sell it. You have the right. I've already contacted a broker. They're ready to move. Once she loses her job, once her name is dragged through the mud, she'll have nothing left to cling to. And what about Alyssa? She's moving in soon. I've already prepared a room for the boy. I felt dizzy, my legs numb, as if they no longer belonged to me. They weren't just planning to leave me. They were planning to erase me. I turned slowly back toward the door, quiet as a shadow. I couldn't let them know I had heard. When I stepped outside, the sun was already setting. I don't remember the drive home. I remember only one thing. Alyssa wasn't a coincidence. She was a plan. And I was the last to know I was being replaced. Since that afternoon, I began playing the role of the broken woman. And strangely, it was easier than I expected. I didn't need to cry. I only had to stay silent, walk a little slower, season dinner a little less, stare out the window a little longer. Nathan thought I was slowly giving up. He even started acting pleasant, offering me wine, cleaning up the kitchen, and saying things with fake concern like, I know this is hard for you, but if we part ways peacefully, it'll be easier on both of us. I responded gently, obediently, as if I had been convinced. But inside, every step I took was heading toward the truth. I contacted a private investigation office in Santa Barbara, one I knew kept everything confidential and asked no questions. The person handling the case was an older woman named Joanna Reyes, with salt and pepper hair and eyes calm to the point of coldness. I said, "I need to know every account and property in my husband's name, even the ones outside of California." She didn't ask more, only nodded, and said, "Within 10 days, I'll send you everything." 9 days later, I received an email with an attachment and a single line, "Open in a quiet place." I sat alone in the small office behind our house, my hands trembling slightly as I clicked. Nathan had placed a down payment on a 2-story house in Salt Lake City, Utah. Co-owner, Alyssa Morgan. The account was under Nathan Carter's name, with a transfer of $25,000 from a personal investment fund never disclosed in our shared financial documents. Deposit date 3 weeks ago? That was when I was still trying to keep dinner warm enough to show him I was nurturing the marriage. I don't remember how long I sat there, staring at the screen. I just know that when I finally stood up, I went to the bathroom and washed my face 3 times. I needed to look tired enough so Nathan wouldn't suspect anything when I stepped back into the living room. "Did you eat yet?" I asked, like nothing was wrong. He shrugged. "Not really hungry, a bit tired, the project's behind schedule." I didn't need to know how deep his lies went. I only needed to remember every word he said. 3 days later, Joanna sent me a second file, a set of medical records quietly photographed from a clinic in Fresno, where Alyssa had gone for prenatal care when she was still living with her mother. I opened the file, scrolled to the section, gestational age 13 weeks, last ultrasound 2 weeks ago, notes, complicated pregnancy history, requires close monitoring. I flipped through the pages quickly and my heart stopped. At the bottom of the report, in the emergency contact section, the first line read, "Kyle Brennan, ex-husband." I didn't know why Alyssa listed him there. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe she still used her old records during the first visit. But for me, it was a door. I didn't hesitate. I booked a ride straight to the address Joanna provided, a small wooden house on the outskirts of Sacramento near a training center for former military personnel. Kyle Brennan opened the door wearing a wrinkled shirt and faded jeans, a buzz cut, a rugged face but tired eyes. I introduced myself, direct and clear. "I'm Lauren Mitchell. I need to talk to you. About Alyssa." He wasn't surprised, he simply stepped aside. "Come in. I figured this would reach me eventually." We sat in a small living room surrounded by the scent of pine and the soft hum of an air purifier. I told him everything. No filter. About Nathan, my mother-in-law, and the plan to build a replacement family with Alyssa at the center. Kyle listened without interruption. When I finished, he rested his arms on his knees, looked up at me and said, "You know the kid's not Nathan's, right?" "But Nathan doesn't." He let out a dry laugh. "Alyssa, she's always calculating, blamed everything on me during the divorce, said I was controlling, abusive. Meanwhile, I was the one working double shifts, sending my full paycheck so she could take church youth leadership classes." I stayed silent. I wasn't there to dig into their past. "If this ends up in court and I need a witness, would you testify?" He looked at me long enough that my heart skipped a beat. "I'm not doing this for revenge. I don't hold anything against Alyssa anymore. But if there's a woman out there being replaced by a lie, I don't want to stay silent again. Thank you. I'm not sure I'll need it. But I need to know I'm not alone." Kyle stood and poured me a glass of water. "You're not alone, Lauren. Trust me. You're not the first woman Alyssa's led into her maze. But maybe you're the first one who knows how to find the way back out." I left Kyle's house at dusk. As the car rolled along the darkening road between rows of trees, I looked up at the deep purple sky and realized this fight wasn't about saving a marriage anymore. It was about saving dignity, the truth, and myself. I filed for divorce on a Monday morning under a gray sky that seemed to understand exactly what was happening. No dramatic announcement. No emotional posts. I just walked into court, filed the papers, and signed with a firm stroke. I didn't need to shout to the world that I had been betrayed, because what I needed wasn't pity. It was a clear, written record of the truth. Monica filed the petition on my behalf. Soon after, she sent a copy to Nathan's legal team. The response didn't take long. Just 2 days later, I received an official reply. Nathan Carter formally contested the division of assets, claiming the house was inherited property and not subject to marital ownership. No surprise. I had expected that. His attorney's name was Richard Mendez, a middle-aged man with slicked-back hair, always in metal-rimmed glasses, speaking in a rehearsed tone like he was reading from a script. The first hearing, he began with a sentence that sounded polite but carried sharp implication. My client hopes for an amicable separation, without conflict or unnecessary harm. He respectfully requests that his former wife vacate the home as soon as possible, to preserve both parties' reputations. Monica didn't respond right away. She simply slid a thick folder to the center of the table and said, lightly as a breeze, "There's plenty to discuss about reputations, but for now, we'd like to confirm a few facts." She flipped the pages. This is a copy of the joint account statements over the past 7 years, clearly showing Ms. Mitchell's contributions toward the monthly mortgage. I sat beside her, saying nothing. My hand rested on my cold palm. Monica continued, her tone calm but sharp as a blade. Here are receipts for furniture purchases made under her name. Kitchen cabinets from Stonehill, imported Italian leather chairs, the commercial-grade washer she selected and installed in 2019. Richard interrupted, trying to maintain composure. "We're not denying Ms. Mitchell made contributions, nor are we demanding half the house," Monica cut in, a brief smile appearing. "We are only asking the court to recognize those contributions as legally valid, sufficient to protect her financial interest." Nathan sat across the table, collar uneven, gripping his pen so tightly I could hear the spring click faintly. I didn't have to speak. The numbers and receipts I had carefully kept over the years, they were speaking for me. The meeting ended without reaching the initial agreement their side had hoped for. Monica gathered the documents and walked out with me. In the elevator, she said quietly, "You thought you'd back down, but you came prepared like someone who knew she'd have to fight. I don't need much. I just need him not to deny the life I lived." The next day, Nathan's lawyer sent a settlement offer, a lump sum paid over 3 months, under the condition that I give up all rights related to the house. Monica called back, without bothering to be polite. "Mr. Carter will not accept a settlement this insulting. If Mr. Carter wants reconciliation, he should propose something that reflects what she actually built." A few days later, Monica received a handwritten letter from Nathan. A short note, in the handwriting I still recognized. No apology, just one sentence. "I used to think she couldn't stand on her own. I was wrong." Monica handed it to me, but I didn't keep it. I wasn't here to collect his regret. I was here to make sure my life wasn't rewritten by anyone but me. I chose a Sunday morning to walk into that church, the place once called my spiritual family, for 8 years. Not because I believed in justice behind stained glass and varnished pews. I came because I wanted my silence to end, in the very place where they once used morality to trample me. I arrived early. I didn't wear black or a blazer like the other women in the group, but a soft olive dress with a folder tucked under my arm. Inside were the divorce summary, financial contributions, property documents, screenshots of bank transfers to Alyssa's account, and a photocopy of the medical records confirming the unborn child wasn't Nathan's. I had sent everything to the church's Ethics Council office 3 days earlier via certified mail. But today I came for one reason only, to put an end to the role of the difficult wife they had written for me all this time. The service began at 9 a.m. As I walked in, Pastor Hall was delivering the opening message, and in the front row, as I had expected, sat Vivian, Nathan, and Alyssa. Vivian sat straight, her hat tilted slightly like every Sunday. Alyssa had her head bowed, hands folded neatly in her lap. Nathan wore a blue shirt, his expression calm, as if he hadn't just been at the center of a property dispute. I walked straight down the aisle between the pews, my heels striking the floor rhythmically, louder than the choir singing. Amazing grace. I didn't stop until I stood right in front of the small altar, where the bronze-plated wooden cross and red velvet-bound Bible rested. Every eye turned to me. Pastor Hall hesitated. "Miss Lauren, is something wrong?" I gently placed the folder on the lectern and turned to face the entire congregation. "I'm not here to explain or justify. I'm here to end this. I am officially resigning my membership in this congregation, and I submit this folder, with documents detailing hypocrisy, manipulation, and the exploitation of faith to push a woman out of her own marriage. Vivian shot to her feet. Lauren, this isn't the place to... I didn't turn to her. I looked directly at Pastor Hall and the council members seated on the left. I once believed this place was for healing, but if faith is used to cover betrayal, then I don't want that kind of faith anymore. Alyssa lowered her head. Nathan remained still, hands clenched until his knuckles turned white. Pastor Hall cleared his throat, trying to keep his tone steady. We will receive the documents and begin a review. I'm not asking for a public trial, I replied. I'm only asking that the truth no longer be pushed aside. I gave a slight nod and turned to leave, but I knew behind me things were beginning to crack, like a long-ignored fracture in glass. 3 days later, Vivian was suspended from her role as women's group coordinator, pending investigation into ethical misconduct involving false statements and damaging gossip about a member. Alyssa was asked to step back from the Sunday school youth program due to unclear personal circumstances that could affect parental trust. Nathan, he wasn't publicly named, but Monica told me some of his friends quietly stepped away, stopped inviting him to charity events like before. As for me, I never went back to that church. The message from Kyle arrived on a Tuesday morning, short, no exclamation point, no extra sentiment. The court approved. Test results confirmed. Both parties will receive them today. I sat quietly in the living room, holding a cold coffee cup. I didn't feel relieved nor tense. It felt like seeing the fire was out, but still smelling the lingering smoke. By afternoon, Monica forwarded me the official report, 4 pages long, full of forensic terminology and ID codes, but only one line made me pause. No biological father-child relationship between Mr. Nathan Carter and the fetus. I saved the file. I didn't send it to court. I didn't share it with anyone. I simply attached it in a private email, sent to Nathan. Subject: FYI. So you have the truth if you want to live truthfully. No commentary, no ellipsis, no negotiation. I don't know if he ever opened that email. And honestly, I don't need to know. 3 days later, Monica finalized the paperwork to withdraw me from the property dispute. We reached a written agreement. I would receive back the full amount I had invested into the house, including upgrades and legal fees. Nathan would retain ownership, just as he had always wanted. I signed my name on the final document with one smooth, unbroken stroke. The file was closed. I moved into a small apartment by the sea in San Clemente at the end of April. A second-floor unit, ivory walls, a balcony looking straight out to an endless stretch of sand. Each morning, sunlight pours into the kitchen, making the water in my glass shimmer like crystal. No one knows I'm here. No one but Monica and Emily. I rented the unit from a widowed woman who lives downstairs. Her name is Margaret. White hair like salt and a love for growing geraniums on the railing. On the day I moved in, she knocked on my door with a loaf of banana bread and said, "I'm not one to pry, dear, but if you ever need a walking partner before the sun gets too harsh, I've got a decent pair of sneakers." I'll keep that in mind, Mrs. Margaret. I placed my easel by the window facing the ocean. I'd kept it in storage for 3 years, always saying, I don't have time. Now I no longer made excuses. Each morning I began by touching the brush to color, with no goal in mind. No one interrupts me here. No sudden doorbells. No commanding voices from the hallway. No more loaded questions about whether I'm planning for children yet or thinking of quitting work to focus on family. I brew coffee the way I like it. Strong, unsweetened, in the green ceramic mug Nathan once called too old lady-ish. I walk along the beach each evening, no mask to wear, no role to maintain, and I don't feel alone. I once thought leaving a 10-year marriage would create an empty space too big to fill, but it turns out it made space. Space enough to exhale without feeling guilty. I don't dream of Nathan anymore, or of Alyssa or Vivian, or the red-roofed house on the Lavender Hill. I dream of unfinished paintings, unexplored paths, and waves crashing like a wordless song I forgot long ago. No one knows whether I won or lost, and maybe that's what I love most. I didn't leave to get revenge. I left to be reborn. I don't know the exact moment that marked my return. It wasn't when I moved into the new apartment. It wasn't when Monica sent a message saying the case is officially closed. Maybe it was a process, quiet as the tide, receding little by little, then suddenly rushing back in, carrying a version of me I had never met before. And 1 year after I walked out of my old life, I stood in the middle of a brightly lit room, surrounded by painted walls, and eyes turned toward me. The exhibition was titled Restored. I wanted to acknowledge the cracks that had been mended, not hidden, not painted over, but present, vivid, seen. I chose to host it at a small gallery in Laguna Beach, big enough to hold the work, but not so grand that ordinary women would feel hesitant to step inside. The first piece hanging by the entrance was an abstract scene, layers of gray torn apart and stitched back together with red thread. No one knew, but it was my emotional map through 12 years of marriage. All profits from the opening night were announced to go toward the Restored Fund, a grant supporting legal aid and temporary housing for women going through financially controlled divorces. Standing in that space, I saw Monica approaching, cream coat white wine in hand, still the same strong presence, but her eyes were softer today. "You're not a lawyer anymore?" I asked. "Still am," she smiled, "but now I'm the honorary legal advisor for a rather stubborn nonprofit." Ha ha ha, sounds familiar. We clinked glasses. No big speeches. Some things between women don't need to be said aloud. A few minutes later, I heard familiar footsteps, hurried, slightly nervous. I turned and saw Emily, her hair longer, cheeks flushed with emotion. She hugged me tight, almost whispering, "You really did it, Lauren." "Not alone," I replied, gently patting her back. "Emily is now the communications director for the entire project. She was the one who helped me reshape my voice. How to tell a story not for pity, but to connect. Not for revenge, but to remind each other. We survived." The event had no expensive champagne, no VIPs, no camera flashes, but every woman who walked in read the captions beneath each painting, occasionally wiping a tear or smiling faintly. That was the success I wanted to hold on to. In a small corner, I overheard a whispered exchange. I heard Nathan Carter is being countersued by his mom and Alyssa. Over that house? Yeah, the deed's in his name, but Vivian claims it's a family legacy and shouldn't have been sold. Alyssa wants damages for being deceived. They were tearing each other apart over the very thing they once used to erase me. And the price of deceit, though late, always arrives. A local magazine reporter approached, asking if I'd be willing to do an interview. "Would you like to share something about your creative process?" I looked around the room. Soft lighting. A quiet presence. I thought for a moment, then replied, "Nothing profound. I just painted the moments I thought I wouldn't survive. And now I'm here. Not to retell a tragedy, but to prove it wasn't the end." He nodded, smiled, then quietly stepped away, as if he understood not every story needs to be picked apart. When night fell, I stood alone before the final painting, a white canvas with nothing but a single golden crack lined with shimmering gold leaf. A woman behind me asked, "Why is this one empty?" I turned and looked at her. Because some chapters of our lives we're still writing, and maybe that's the most beautiful part. That night, the ocean breeze slipped through a cracked window, carrying the scent of salt and bay laurel from the balcony. I was sitting in my private studio, a small room I had converted from a guest bedroom, where warm yellow light touched each painting, each old stain on the oak desk. Glass of red wine sat beside the speaker. The jazz track I used to play back in Santa Barbara was on, blue and green. The melody drifted like silk, weaving through every thought. I had no plans for the evening. No one to meet, no emails to answer, no calendar reminders. Just me, and silence in its truest form. I don't write memoirs. I don't do long interviews. I've turned down every article asking about the past, about my inspiring story. On the desk, among brushes and sketchbooks, was a handwritten letter. The paper slightly yellowed, the handwriting tilted, deliberate. "Thank you for giving me a chance to speak. Not everyone lets others tell the truth, especially when the truth doesn't serve their victory. I wish you continued strength, but more than that, peace. Kyle Brennan." I read it for the third time, then folded it, carefully placing it into the old wooden box in the corner of my desk, the one where I keep things not needed for work but too important to throw away. On the lid, a line I had carved myself. Evidence isn't meant to hurt anyone, it's meant to protect yourself. I used to think justice meant making someone bow their head in shame, but now I understand. Some victories don't need acknowledgement, they just need you to no longer need an apology. I poured a little more wine, stepped out onto the balcony. The night breeze was cool, a salty tang on the tongue. Below, the sand shimmered with scattered light from nearby homes. In the distance, a child laughed from one apartment. A small dog barked once, then fell silent. I leaned against the railing, still holding my glass, eyes scanning the star-filled sky. I didn't wish for anything. I didn't remember anything. I simply felt like I was exactly where I needed to be, at the right moment in the life I chose for myself. Emily once said to me during a team meeting, "You don't know this, Lauren, but when I saw you standing on stage at the opening of Restored, I thought, that's someone they no longer recognize." I didn't reply, but inside I knew she was right. Not that I became someone else, I just stopped letting others rewrite me the way they wanted. Vivian, Alyssa, Nathan, maybe they're still spinning in their own world. Maybe they've moved, maybe they're still trying to rebuild something after their plan collapsed. I don't follow, I don't ask, I don't mention them, because I don't live in comparison to them anymore. I think of my mother, who passed away when I was still in college. She used to teach me how to sew, and once said, "Some stitches, once pulled out, can't be sewn back in, but you can use that thread to make something else, stronger, more beautiful, and just for you." Back then I was too young to understand, now I know. Sometimes the best thing you can do is start over, with the same hands that once trembled. I stepped back into the room and set down the glass. No need to say anything. No need to document anything else. Just the music still playing, and a woman who was once overlooked, now living in peace, in a life no one else can take away. I know that somewhere in what I've just shared, you might see yourself. Maybe in the part where doubts begin, or where quiet truth is gathered, or maybe at the end, where standing alone no longer feels empty. Have you ever been treated like you were replaceable? By someone you loved? Someone you once shared a home and a bed with? Have you ever stayed silent, not out of fear, but because you were listening to the truth rising beneath the illusion of peace? If you have, I hope this story gave you something. Not anger or vengeance, but the belief that you have the right to choose yourself, even when others try to strip that from you. I'd love to hear your story. Leave a comment below. Even one line is enough to remind us we're not alone in these seemingly separate chapters of life. And if you'd like to follow more journeys about family truth and the quiet strength of rebirth, don't forget to subscribe, because there are still so many stories waiting to be told. Tonight's story ends with the silence of a small room and warm light, but who knows, the next one might begin with your voice.